If you've always dreamed of visiting Arizona, this is the episode for you. Here's a 30-second teaser of the episode.
A lot of people don't think that Arizona ever gets snow, and we get a lot of snow actually in the higher mountain towns. Saguaros take around 50 to 75 years to grow one arm, like I said. So if you see one with like 10 arms, it's very old. I think the oldest saguaro on record was 300 years old. There's a place called White Pocket there that looks like Mars. Like it does not look like it's of this planet, and it's super, super off the beaten path because of our diverse culinary community and tradition that's shared through food from indigenous and immigrant influences. And all the people have moved to Arizona long before it even became a state. UNESCO named it this city of gastronomy.
Hello and welcome. My name is Abigail Bliss, and today I'm joined by Betty Hurd, who generally is the host of the Travel Lemming podcast. But for this episode, we've swapped places to talk about attractions across Arizona. And there's no better expert than Betty, who was born and raised in beautiful Tucson. She's been all over the world, but arguably there's nowhere she knows better than her home state. Betty, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Abigail. Yes, I'm Betty Hurd, and I was born and raised in Arizona. I'm super excited to talk about it on the show today. I'm a senior travel writer for Travel Lemming, and if you've listened to the podcast before, you've probably seen me. I am one of the hosts of the show, along with Nate and some other guest hosts. So, yeah, awesome to be on the guest side of the table today. Thank you so much for interviewing me about my home state.
Of course. I'm so excited to hear more. I mean, I have been working with Betty for years now on the travel lemming side of things. She has written almost 70 guides and I've edited the large majority. So I've gotten to learn about a lot about Arizona just in reading your guides. But I think it's always fun to hear you kind of share a little bit more, share some anecdotes. And I'm excited for you to kind of dive into it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know Arizona pretty much just as well as me now. I think Abigail has edited probably every single one of my Arizona articles. So,
Yeah, and they're always such fun reads, so highly recommend checking out that library, but to get into it today, I think maybe, Betty, if you could start off by giving us a bit of background just about your Arizona knowledge and sort of what just makes you the expert.
I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which is in the southern part of the state. And I lived there until I was 23 years old. I'm now 27. So since then, I've also lived other places and then come back. So collectively, probably lived in Arizona for 25 years. I graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in journalism, which kind of got me here. I recently lived in Phoenix before getting based in Los Angeles for work. So right now, I'm in my apartment in LA. But yeah, lots of time in Arizona, and I've been to every national park. There are 3 of them. I've hiked and camped everywhere thanks to my brother. He's the outdoorsy one of the family. So, I feel like I've really seen, like, every part of Arizona. I've lived in the 2 biggest cities and gone to seemingly every wilderness. So, I think I can confidently talk about the state. It's what I know better than any other place in the whole world.
If you could kind of summarize, right? Why should somebody travel to Arizona?
So, Arizona is home to some of the most incredible natural beauty on earth, like the Grand Canyon, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, for anyone who didn't know. And I think that the Grand Canyon, I mean, we're the Grand Canyon state. So, that's what most people associate with Arizona when they think about it. But there's so much more than just that. I mean, we also have amazing places like Sedona, Saguaro National Park. I could go on for hours and hours, which we'll get into some more of those. But it's so gorgeous here, really different environment. We have the Sonoran Desert, which is home to some of the most ecologically diverse species of plants and animals in the entire world. It's a completely different desert environment than any other desert on Earth as well. We have over 300 days of sun a year and some of the best hiking and camping on Earth. Aside from its natural beauty, the people are friendly and lively, and the sense of culture is stronger than anywhere else I've ever lived. So, Arizonans are just very proud of their home, and we love to share our food, our heritage, and livelihood with visitors.
Love that. Yeah, in the number of trips that I've made out to Arizona, which I've probably been 3 or 4 or 5 times now, I couldn't agree more. It's got this wonderful combination of urban and outdoors. To your point, the people are phenomenal. So, yeah, I love Arizona, and again, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted you to be the one interviewing me today, because I know you and your husband have made a couple trips to Arizona, so we'll talk about your experience as well. I'd love to get your perspective as a visitor. And for anybody who is interested in traveling to Colorado, which, is catty-cornered from the state, and we kinda join up at the 4 corners, Abigail and I just did an episode on Colorado just a couple episodes back. So check that out after this one if you're interested in her expertise where she lives.
Absolutely. Just make it into one big road trip, right?
Absolutely. Oh my god, it'd be like the best road trip ever.
For real, absolutely. You already kind of touched on it, right? We've got Colorado in that Four Corners region, but if you paint a picture for listeners, for viewers, kind of where Arizona lies on the map and give us a bit of geography there.
Of course. So Arizona is in the southwest United States. So to the west is California, to the north is Utah, to the east is New Mexico, and to the south is Mexico. So the southern two-thirds, about, I would say, of Arizona is desert, while the top third is the more forested high plains region. And there's like a little bit of diversity sprinkled in even within those different realms, too. It's not just like a super stark cutoff of desert to mountains, of course. The Grand Canyon is pretty close to centered in the upper quadrant of the state. So you're going to find that in northern Arizona. The biggest cities population-wise are Tucson and Phoenix, with little sub-cities around them that also have pretty formidable populations. But we're just going to lump them into Tucson and Phoenix right now just for the sake of time. And Flagstaff is also very well known, but I kind of think of it more as a college town than a city. But those are like the three big ones with the three big universities. I actually have this pillow behind me for those watching on YouTube that my mom got me with a whole map of Arizona embroidered on it and this little cactus pillow as well. Like my whole apartment is just decorated with all Arizona stuff, even though I'm in California. I want everyone to know that I'm a strong Arizona native. But yeah, so that's kind of like the map of it painted out.
I love that so much because I feel like it just, kind of speaks to what you just said, Betty, about how people from Arizona take so much state pride. So the fact that you still have your Arizona knickknacks all over your LA apartment, yeah, I think again, it speaks to just how much you love your home state. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm sure this is really difficult because there's so many wonderful things to do in Arizona, but if you had to narrow it down to the best things to do, what would you recommend to first time visitors?
The first thing I would say is to visit at least one of the three national parks. They're kind of spread out, so unless you're spending an extensive amount of time there, it'd be kind of hard to visit all three or even two of them. But the Grand Canyon is a must. I mean, if it's your first time in the state, I think that that's one of the biggest things that you should see because no photo will ever do it justice. And people come from all over the world to see the Grand Canyon. It's incredible. The South Rim is the deserty side. It's much more accessible right now. We're filming this towards the end of 2025, well, middle end of 2025. And unfortunately, there was a fire on the North Rim earlier this year. So a lot of that is unfortunately inaccessible at this time.
Yeah, yeah, and I read that also, I before this episode did a bit of research because of course, fires across the Southwest, the Western United States as a whole are unfortunately quite common. I did read that the North Rim is closed for the remainder of 2025 for any listeners who were hoping to visit that side. Again, there's a lot to do on the South Rim, but the Rim to Rim Trail, that is quite iconic, that is currently closed. Bright Angel Trail below a certain point, I also read is closed. So just got to do your research. But I agree, Betty, like the Grand Canyon, right? It's called the Grand Canyon State for a reason. So
Yeah, with the fires, it's heartbreaking to hear about, but hopefully, if you're planning a trip to Arizona, by the time you go, these issues have been resolved and, things have been restored and it's still gorgeous there. Anyway, aside from that, aside from visiting the Grand Canyon, there's also the Petrified Forest National Park, which is in like the northeastern side of the state. So it's part of the Painted Desert, which the name kind of speaks for itself. It's this gorgeous area that is filled with all these petrified rocks that are thousands of years old. I can't even like really put it into words what this area looks like because they're just scattered over miles and miles of this national park. And it's unlike any place I've ever seen. The third national park being Saguaro National Park, which is right in my hometown where I grew up. I've been there countless times. It's my favorite place, possibly in the whole world. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Aside from visiting the national parks, hiking and camping is huge in the state. Some of my favorite hikes include Lost Dutchman State Park, which is right near Phoenix. The great thing about Phoenix is that there's tons of different hikes all around the city. Not necessarily like right in the city, but if you have a car, like some of the greatest hikes in the state are within an hour of the capital. Sabino Canyon in Tucson is probably the most popular hiking area in Tucson. gorgeous hikes there, like Blackett's Ridge, which is really difficult. It's like straight up this ridge, but it's the greatest views I've ever seen. And Seven Falls, which after the monsoons, these raging waterfalls in the desert. So, so beautiful. It's like nothing you've ever seen, I swear. And then Havasu Falls in the Grand Canyon, which I have not personally been to yet. It is on my bucket list. My brother's been, I've seen the photos from a million different people. It's the most incredible scene ever. It's like this turquoise blue waterfall that flows down this red rock part of the Grand Canyon. It's quite a hike to get there, but if you're up for it, you can try to get a permit. Usually it takes about a year from when you become part of the lottery to get that permit, but definitely worth your while. And I got to do that one of these days too. Also, I recommend exploring the Sonoran Desert. So, like I said before, it's one of the most biologically diverse deserts in the world. It is home to the saguaro cactus, and it only grows here in the Sonoran Desert, which takes over part of the very northern part of Mexico, which is the state of Sonora, into Arizona and a little part of California as well. But the most lush, dense parts of the Sonoran Desert are in Arizona. So the monsoons make it really, really lush. That's when we get these crazy summer storms, and the whole desert just turns this brilliant green. There's thousands of plant species, I think over 2,000, and tons of different animals. We have coyotes, desert tortoises, bobcats, mountain lions, rattlesnakes, so many different things. So the Sonoran Desert is very alive.
I love that. I think a lot of people think of Arizona as, just being this barren place with a bunch of tumbleweeds, but I love you mentioning that, actually the Sonoran Desert is so lush and green, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really different from what people expect, at least, like, especially people like coming from the East Coast who have never spent time in the Southwest. I think they really have a skewed, almost like cartoon version of like, the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner running around in Arizona. And it's like Monument Valley and just dirt and desert and you know, it's so alive with so much plant life and animal life, and it's gorgeous. My recommendation, if you wanna see the best of the Sonoran Desert, is to drive through Saguaro National Park, east or west in Tucson. That's where you're gonna see thousands and thousands of saguaro cacti, along with all the other beautiful plant life in the Sonoran Desert.
Love that. And I just want to check too, for maybe listeners who aren't familiar with what a saguaro cacti is. What does that look like?
It's this really big, almost tree-like cactus, and, they have arms, like, they kind of stick out like this. It takes them about 50 to 75 years to grow 1 arm, so after that, it doesn't take that long per arm, but, like, if you see a saguaro that has 10 different arms, it's likely that thing's been around for, like, 150 years. So, they're very carefully protected, which I'm gonna get into a little bit later too, but it's just one of the most unique facets of our environment in Arizona, which I've always taken for granted. It's funny when you see visitors who've never seen a saguaro cactus, they're just in awe of them because they're everywhere. So, especially in Saguaro National Park, I especially recommend driving through the western side. It's probably a lot more accessible if you're visiting Tucson. It's about 15 minutes from downtown. Meanwhile, the eastern side of Saguaro National Park is probably like a full hour even from downtown. It's really gorgeous over there, much more secluded and remote, way less traffic, a lot of bicyclists going through there. But yeah, Saguaro National Park West is super easy to visit, and you can't miss it if you go to Tucson. And also, if you go to Tucson, you should visit the Sonoran Desert Museum. It's one of the most beloved museums probably in the entire country. They have all these different exhibits there filled with the wildlife that is native to the Sonoran Desert, kind of like the ones I've mentioned before. So you can see javelinas, mountain lions, coyotes, all those kinds of things. They have an entire reptile section. They have raptors that fly around. So it's just like it's kind of like a zoo, but all of these animals are living in their natural habitats in these huge expanses of exhibits. So like, they're not like just on display like they would be at a zoo, and you get to learn a lot about the Sonoran Desert there. It's a great place to take the kids if you go with your family to Tucson.
I definitely want to add that to my bucket list. I'm curious too, I actually have seen some javelinas out in the wild, but I think that's very unique to Arizona and that particular region. So anyone who has never seen a javelina, could you kind of describe what is that little creature for us?
Yeah, of course. I forget that that's also like not a common thing. So javelinas are our wild pig, and they're everywhere in Arizona, especially like in the really lush desert regions. So where I grew up in Tucson, they're really famous for knocking down people's trash cans and going through your garbage. So I can't tell you how many times when I was a little kid right before school, my mom would be like, "Get out there and go pick up the garbage because the javelinas knocked all of our trash into the street." And it's just so ridiculous. Like, we've even had it happen where, like, we lifted up the garbage can and there was a baby javelina still in the garbage. Like, they're kind of, like, notorious for that. Honestly, I think they're really cute, but they're pretty dangerous too. So you don't wanna, like, get close to one if you see one. I've had one, like, charge me when I was walking the dogs before.
That is so funny though. Like, I love that. They're almost like Arizona's unique little raccoons. So
Yeah, exactly. Like, the way I'm talking about it right now, I feel like someone who's never seen one would be like, "That sounds terrifying," but we're just always like, "Oh, look at there's, like, 15 javelinas outside. Look, it's just another day in the life in Tucson," or,
love that.
wherever.
Well, yeah,
Um,
you can see them at the museum too though, they're
yes.
always there. So
Absolutely, and then you'll feel maybe a little bit safer there. Yeah, so those are my big recommendations if you wanna get the best out of the Sonoran Desert. Also, if you want to experience the Wild West, which, is what Arizona is kind of, acclaimed for as Tombstone. So, if you've ever seen the movie, the very famous movie, Tombstone, you can go there and it looks pretty much identical to the set of the movie. They filmed it there. So Tombstone kind of feels like you're stepping back into the past. They have all these horse-drawn carriages. The main street is this dirt path. There's all these saloons. You can go into the saloons. They still have the original bullet holes in the ceiling from when, outlaws and lawmen were hanging out in there and they would get into gunfights and, just start shooting at the ceiling because I guess that was normal back then. And it's really wild that they have these very, very old buildings that they've maintained so well, and they have a daily gunfight, which is kinda crazy. Obviously not real guns, but if you wanna bring the family there too, it's kinda, like, kitschy and, touristy. It's very touristy for sure, but it's a lot of fun. So if you want that Wild West experience in Arizona, I'd recommend going to Tombstone for sure. Also, a lake day would be awesome. A lot of people don't think about lakes in Arizona, but we have some really awesome ones. I think we only have 2 actual natural lakes and the rest are man-made, but these man-made lakes are gorgeous. The best ones I would say are around Phoenix, and then there's also Lake Havasu City, which is in the northwestern corner of the state. It's pretty far from things, so in terms of the Phoenix lakes, like Lake Pleasant, Canyon Lake, they are so much fun because you can go and rent a boat and you can water ski, jet ski, paddleboard, kayak, and a lot of these places will have these crazy, like, canyon walls where you can go down this little, like, sliver of the canyon in the lake, and if you don't go during the super busy seasons, which are, like, summer, spring break, you can have, like, an entire section of this waterway and a canyon with these crazy towering walls and, like, bighorn sheep above you and have it all to yourself, and it's so cool. Some of these places have really ancient petroglyphs there too, so I definitely recommend doing a day on the lake, which I have an article on the best lakes in Arizona if you wanna look into which one might fit the bill best for your trip, but it's some of my fondest memories in Arizona have been spent on the lake. You can also ski or snowboard in Arizona. A lot of people don't think that Arizona ever gets snow, and we get a lot of snow actually in the higher mountain towns. We have 3 ski resorts. The best one, in my opinion, is Sunrise, which is in between the very small mountain towns of Pinetop and Greer. That's where I learned to snowboard when I was, 9 years old. They have several mountains, tons of different really, really good runs, actually, things that I think would parallel some Colorado ski runs. Obviously, not on the same level as Colorado, like we talked about in our last episode, but I think it's a lot of fun for people to visit Arizona and see what skiing is like. And like I said, I think that that's the best of them. The next one, though, is probably more popular, which is Snowball in Flagstaff. If you go there, you'll see a lot of college students who go to Northern Arizona University right there. Lots of families who come up from Phoenix. It's only about 2 hours from Phoenix, whereas Sunrise is about 4. And yeah, I have very fond memories there too. Used to go with all my friends and broke my wrist there snowboarding. That was a great time. But it's gorgeous. And the last one is actually the southernmost ski resort in the United States, which is Mount Lemon Ski Valley. And that is right in my hometown of Tucson. I mean, it's not like right there because you have to drive up the mountain about an hour and a half. But it's not the best skiing, let me tell you right now. There have been times where I would go down and, have to slow down because someone was in the way, and then just come to a complete stop because there'd be, like, a full, like, half-mile section where it's just leveled off, and I'd have to unbind from my snowboard and walk it down, so not the best runs, it's very limited too. It's really unique though because you'll be at the top of the mountain surrounded by snow and pine trees, but you can look beyond it at this vast desert landscape of Tucson and the surrounding parts. So, it's a lot of fun. I also love Mount Lemmon, and I'll talk about that a little bit more too. But yeah, if you're in Tucson, you have the opportunity to go skiing or snowboarding there as well. So, definitely check that out if that's a sport that you're interested in.
That sounds so unique. You know, I am a big skier myself and I have never skied in Arizona, but I love the idea of like skiing above a desert. I mean, there's not too many places you can do that. So that sounds really
Right.
cool.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. I remember the first time I snowboarded in Colorado, I was like, "Oh, this is what it's like to really snowboard." Like, so, so different, so many more runs, such a vast landscape of just snow and mountains and trees, and it's just not really like that at any of the places in Arizona. But I think it's a really fun time still, and like I said, like, if you go to Sunrise, even Snowball's also a good one. I think that you'll find some pretty challenging runs there. So you'd have to let me know if you ever go to Arizona in the wintertime. You got to tell me if you try out one of the ski valleys.
Absolutely. It's on the bucket list. One of these days I'll get out there for some snow fun.
For sure. One of the best things you absolutely have to do in Arizona is indulge in the culinary scene. So you can eat some really great food, drink some really great beer. If you're not a beer person, we've got some awesome craft cocktails. People are really, really into the foodie scene all throughout Arizona. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the episode too, some more of my like more specific suggestions. But go out to eat. Don't just like, try to go to the store and eat in for your trip if you're visiting. Go out to the restaurants and try some really good Mexican food. It's like the greatest Mexican food I've ever had in my entire life. I hear from people all the time like, "Well, what about California Mexican food or New Mexican food?" Obviously, Mexican food is like amazing. But, in the United States, I don't think Arizona can be beaten. So, that's my little shtick there, and I will die on that hill. Finally, you can go to a sporting event. We have some really awesome teams in Arizona. We have the Phoenix Suns for basketball, which I'm a huge fan of. Been to one of those games at the Footprint Center in downtown Phoenix, which is always a great time. There's also the Arizona Diamondbacks, which have done pretty good in baseball recently. I think that this year they did pretty bad, but you can get some really cheap tickets for things like that. There's also the Cardinals for football in Phoenix. All of them are pretty much going to be in Phoenix. So if that's where you're headed, you'll have a lot more options. We also have spring training for the Dodgers in Phoenix. So yeah, you got quite a few options there if you're a big sports fan. So sorry, that was a lot, and, like I said, I have a lot of articles on travel lemming that you can read, like, more in depth about all this, but god, I could go on forever and ever, and there's just no way we can cover all of this in one podcast.
I mean, truly, there's so much to do in Arizona, but I think you gave a lot of great options there, Betty, because I mean, everything from outdoors to sports to, just food and drink, there really is so much to explore. So thanks for that overview. I'm sure this next question too is equally as difficult because again, there's so much to do and see, but if you had to point people, to just 5 attractions, they're only in Arizona for a short period of time, what would those 5 attractions be?
My top 5 attractions in Arizona, that's a tough one, but I'd say my first one is Saguaro National Park. I'm a little biased because, like I said, I grew up right there next to it, have visited it thousands of times probably, but it's just such a gorgeous national park, and it's really accessible too, so you could bring anyone from the family. You can drive through it if you don't wanna get out of the car. You can go on hikes, you can horseback ride there. There's so much to do within the national park. So, if you're visiting Tucson, that is a must-see. Kayaking the Colorado River. I did this just last year where I kayaked from the top of the river that comes from Lake Powell, which is at the very, very northern part of Arizona on the border with Utah. And we got to kayak all the way around Horseshoe Bend. If you don't know what Horseshoe Bend is, it's this incredible rock formation that's super famous. People travel from all over the world to photograph it. And it's just this meander of the Colorado River that eventually goes to the Grand Canyon. Really, really stunning scenery there. And we got to camp right on the banks of the river there. And yeah, just getting to kayak through these incredible canyon walls and get out and, explore slot canyons, which If you haven't heard of Antelope Canyon, that's the most well-known slot canyon in Arizona, which is gorgeous, but this is such a cool place because there's, like, no one around, so you kinda get everything to yourself. That's kind of why, like, I like to recommend to people the road less traveled because I feel like it's way more special when you kinda feel like you get to experience it on your own.
Absolutely. And to that point too, Betty, I mean, like you wrote a really extensive itinerary on your travels along the Colorado River last summer. And I just loved it because I think for me, I too love to get away from the crowds, would rather go out and venture on my own. And I feel like sometimes when it comes to rafting, water sports, that can feel kind of intimidating. So just for those listening and maybe haven't yet read your guide, is kayaking along this section of the Colorado River technical at all? Like, do you need to
No.
have skills to navigate whitewater?
No, definitely not. I know that there are times of the year, I'm not sure exactly when the water is, stronger, of course, but when I went, and I'll include some clips, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can kinda see what the water looks like. It just carried us so gently up the river. Actually, we even camped downstream from a section that we wanted to hike, so we set up camp and then kayaked back upstream, which was hard, but not impossible because the water was so calm. So, yeah, it was so easygoing. I think anybody with any skill level could kayak the Colorado River, at least in this section.
Nice. I love beginner-friendly adventure, but again, you're in this really remote, unique place. Like, I feel like even if it doesn't require technical skills, you're gonna get this epic adventure and memories that you're gonna take with you. So, thanks for touching on that.
Of course, yeah, it was like a top 3 adventure my whole life. Also Sedona, I think everybody kinda knows a little bit about Sedona. It's this red rock magical landscape about 2 hours, well, less than 2 hours north of Phoenix, and it's got these incredible rock formations, really, really awesome hiking. They have vortexes. It's a very spiritual place if you're into that kinda thing. Like, there's a lot of places you can go and get your aura read and, have your crystals aligned, whatever that is. It's just like it's a very interesting community with a bunch of people who are very in tune with their natural surroundings there. So, a very spiritual place. It's just stunning. My brother got married there a few years back, and it's just like the most gorgeous destination for anything from a weekend camping getaway to a wedding. So, definitely recommend getting there. It's also quite accessible.
Very cool. Yeah, I've also been to Sedona a couple times and I love it up there. Like you said, it's a little woo-woo, but there's a great art scene. It feels really accessible, but again, like you're immediately out in nature getting onto any of those trails. But I did notice on my couple of trips, and maybe it was the time of year, but it can be very crowded and in my, experience, quite difficult to park. So do you have any tips for people to maybe, help them navigate those crowds?
Yeah, you're very right about that. It gets crazy, crazy busy in Sedona. If you go on a 3-day weekend, I almost would say don't even bother then because everybody from Phoenix and Flagstaff is going to Sedona. If you are driving on I-17, you pull off on, I believe, Highway 179. Sometimes it'll be backed up all the way to the highway just for miles with cars because it's like pretty, for the most part, it's one lane both ways. So, yeah, during, like, holiday time, Sedona gets very, very packed. I would recommend going in the off season, which is gonna be, like those shoulder seasons of springtime before it gets into summer, and then the opposite time where it's, like, the end of summer going into fall. Again, don't go on holiday weekends, but those are also gonna be, like, since it's at a higher elevation, those times of the year will be very mild and temperate, and you're gonna enjoy your time a lot more because you won't be dealing with bumper to bumper traffic.
Thanks for touching on that, because yeah, I still loved Sedona. Even if you go in the summer, I did it. It's still such a wonderful place. I think that's worth visiting, but yeah, just gotta, maybe wake up a little early to snag one of those few parking spots if you are going to a popular trail. But like you said,
Mhm.
off season, if you can do it, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like you said too, if you can wake up early. See, I'm so not a morning person, so I always just, like, opt for the time of year when I can kind of go at my own pace. But yeah, if you wake up super early and you can beat the crowds and kinda get ahead of them before everyone heads to the trailhead, or the downtown area. The next thing that I recommend doing in Arizona is wine tasting. So there's 2 big areas that I recommend the most. One is Sonoita, which is south of Tucson and just north of the Mexican border. So it's in this gorgeous grassland area with these very beautiful mountains surrounding the area. And they have probably like 15 different vineyards in Sonoita alone, Sonoita and Elgin. And you can go wine tasting to all of these different spots. You can buy a wine glass from one and just take that same wine glass to all the different vineyards for like, I don't know, $5 wine tastings. And it's so, so much fun. It's really easy to go from Tucson to Sonoita too. You can stay at a bed and breakfast. Obviously, you need to have a DD because you don't want to make the hour and a half drive back to Tucson after sampling 20 different wines. But they have some really awesome wines, especially red wines. So if you're into that kind of thing, Sonoita is the place to be. There's also Cottonwood, which is in between Phoenix and Flagstaff. Cottonwood is located along the Verde Valley River, which is the reason why this whole area is such awesome wine country. So it just makes the perfect conditions for, I think they also have about 15 different vineyards around there. So check out the Verde Valley Wine Trail. You can also take a train there, and you can take this train through the canyon and go to all these different wine spots. So that's a very unique kind of like hidden gem thing to do in Arizona. And then in addition to wine, do a food tour. That's my last big thing. Like I said before, like whether you do a business organized food tour wherever you're staying, or you just look at Google Maps and choose a whole bunch of different restaurants to go to, you should try the local cuisine in Arizona, which we'll talk more about food shortly, but I think that you will try some of the best food in your entire life when you come here. So make sure that you get to expand your palate in that way.
Well, thank you so much for that overview, Betty. I feel like, again, there's so many great places to visit, so many great things to do in Arizona. Take notes as you're listening because, yeah, there's a lot to add. But this is another big question here, like, so what about hidden gems? I'd love if you could cover some places that are maybe off the beaten path.
Of course, so some of these places might not be considered a hidden gem to a local Arizonan, but might be some things that you wouldn't think about on your visit. So I think my favorite hidden gem out of all of the places in Arizona is Vermilion Cliffs, which is in the way northern part, very close to the Utah border. It's this incredible environment where they have these really wild, well, cliffs and canyon formations. So you can hike up there. It's very close to Page, Arizona, which is where Horseshoe Bend is that I mentioned earlier. Antelope Canyon, Lake Powell, but Vermilion Cliffs is like a lesser known area. And there's a place called White Pocket there that looks like Mars. Like it does not look like it's of this planet. And it's super, super off the beaten path. It's very difficult to get there. I think my brother would be annoyed with me for even sharing this with people because he's like, don't tell anyone about White Pocket. But it's part of the Vermilion Cliffs landscape. And you have to like let the air out of your tires on this super sandy road for like 2 hours. And you eventually get there, and it's like the most incredible hiking and camping I've done in my entire life. So that is specifically White Pocket, but Vermilion Cliffs offers so many incredible camping and hiking spots. So if you find yourself in northern Arizona, definitely go off the beaten path and check out that whole area. You'll see things just off the main highway that will blow your mind. Also, Jerome is an old mining town about an hour and a half north of Phoenix. And it's one of my favorite places to bring people. It's kind of known for its like ghost adventure, haunted hotels, that type of thing now. But it's built into this really steep cliffside, and you can actually see Sedona across the valley, like quite a ways away. But it's so gorgeous there. And the people are so unique and interesting, and they have a lot of really cool museums. You can stay at a haunted hotel, which I did for my grandpa's 90th birthday. And, I didn't see any ghosts, but, I was only there for one night, and there were people walking around with their like EVP things or whatever it's called. Like, it's a huge place for ghost hunters. It was also on the show Ghost Hunters. So Jerome's a really cool place if you want to go on like a fun little day trip from Phoenix. Chiricahua National Monument is one of the most gorgeous places in Arizona. It's very close to Wilcox, which is where people go for apple picking, orchard season in Arizona. It's also wine country too, another place you can go wine tasting. It's about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours east of Tucson, pretty close to the New Mexico border. And Chiricahua National Monument is where you'll find hoodoos, which are these incredible rock formations. They're like these columns of rock. They're everywhere. You can go on the most incredible hike to see this crazy landscape. You can also go camping there. So if you're outdoorsy, I think you would love Chiricahua National Monument. It's also not super crowded. Anytime I've ever been there, I feel like it's just kind of hard to get to, so a lot of people don't go, which I think makes it even better. I really love spelunking, which is cave exploring in southern Arizona. There's a bunch of caves that are not monitored and not regulated by any means. There's some that very much so are, like Kartchner Caverns and Colossal Cave near Tucson, which are awesome places, but you can also go to some caves, like, there's Pepper Sauce Cave, which is north of Tucson, which I love, where you actually have to, like, get on your hands and knees and crawl, like, army crawl through this tiny little crack in the mountain, and then you come to this, like, cathedral room inside of the cave, and you can go all the way down deep into it and find, like, an underground lake. It's so cool, so if you have, like, a headlamp and you like to get, like, down and dirty and go exploring, you can go into places like this. Pepper Sauce is my favorite, but there's a lot of other places if you look up, like, Reddit threads and things like that, where you can just see so many different caves, and the biggest sign that you're near a bunch of, like, underground networks is the Ocotillo cactus, which we'll put up a photo of it if you're watching on YouTube, but they will just go crazy above ground in these environments where, like, everything beneath them is hollow, so if you're, like, driving, especially in, like, eastern Arizona, and you see, like, an entire forest of ocotillos, it means there's probably, like, a massive network of caves below them, which is really interesting to me.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that little tip. I mean, again, as someone who likes to get off the beaten path, likes to be outside, that sounds really, really cool, and I love that tip on how to, know that there's a cave nearby.
Yeah, and they're really everywhere in Southern Arizona. I wish I knew more about, like, the actual geology of it all, but I don't. But obviously be safe and tell people where you're going and do your research beforehand if you're gonna go to ones that aren't regulated, but yeah, it's a really awesome, very unique thing to do in Arizona. It's also, especially if you do it in the summertime, it's really cool underground, so you're not, like, pouring sweat. It's, like, one of the few outdoor things you can do during the summer. The college towns aren't really hidden gems, but I just wanna point out Tucson is the University of Arizona. That's my alma mater. That's the best school in Arizona. Then there's Arizona State University in Tempe, which is pretty much Phoenix. It's both of those have awesome, really beautiful campuses. I recommend walking around them if you visit either of those major towns in Arizona, cities. And then in Flagstaff, I mentioned before, there's Northern Arizona University. So it's also like a really gorgeous college town, really fun vibe. I love just walking around the NAU campus and just getting to like hang out in the college vibe is always a good time.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those hidden gems. I personally have not been to most of these, so I love all of that insight. I have been to Jerome and can totally agree that, like, if you're the ghost hunting type, such a cool place to go and visit, but even just to, like, take photos, like, I couldn't believe how steep that town was, so that was
Yeah, it's
really unique.
wild.
Yeah, truly, and I have been to Flagstaff, and I just wanted to throw in a couple of hidden gems of my own, just in my own travels through Arizona. So one of them actually is in Flagstaff, the Lowell Observatory. This observatory is where Pluto was first discovered, and my husband and I took a tour there, and it was so cool. They, like, took out a laser pointer when we're pointing out constellations, let us look through these massive professional telescopes that let us see, nebula and Jupiter and, like, just all kinds of, like, celestial objects that you definitely cannot see with the naked eye. And yeah, it was just a really cool, unique place to go and visit. And also, Flagstaff, again, being higher up and in this desert environment, it creates these perfect conditions for seeing stars and other objects in the skies. So highly recommend a visit there if you're in Flagstaff. And then another hidden gem of mine is Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument. It's so out there. I'm not even sure how it ended up on our itinerary, but my husband and I went down there one year in October, and it was 105 degrees while we were hiking. It was so, so hot, but I think it honestly added to the experience because it's right there on the Mexico border. There's not a lot of highways that lead that direction, but it's really cool. Highly recommend a trip down there. These organ pipe cacti are massive, and they surely look like an organ pipe. They have all these spindly legs sticking up into the sky, and some of them are, 10, 15 feet tall, and just like really unique, just unique desert cacti that I have seen nowhere else. So, alongside the saguaro and, some other species, it's just so unique to what is Arizona. So, recommend a trip down there. And yeah,
I'm very impressed that you guys made it that far south because yeah, it's really far down there. That's right next to the Sonoran border. So Gosh, yeah, the organ pipes are incredible. There's one on this pillow over here, if you're watching. Yeah, nothing like you said, it's very similar to how the saguaro cactus is native to just this area of the entire world. You won't find organ pipes, at least this species of organ pipe cactus, anywhere else, and they are quite a sight to behold. So I'm glad you got to see that with your husband.
Yeah, it was such a special one. I talk about it still all the time. Just one of the most unique parts. And, again, it's literally on the Mexico border. And so I remember we had to go through like a checkpoint and, they were asking where we're going and what we've been up to and where we're heading next. So that was also a very unique experience. I don't know if you
Mhm.
have that also in like on the Tucson side, but that was a first for me. So something maybe to prepare for.
Yeah, definitely a lot of checkpoints anytime you get within, like, probably 100 miles of the border with Mexico. Yeah, it's just like, "Well, I'm just going to look at cacti." They're
Exactly.
used to it. They're used to it.
Right. I look like a tourist. So
Yeah.
awesome. And Betty, too, I wanted to ask you as far as like other hidden gems, I think archaeological sites are really unique to Arizona. So, like cliff dwellings, petroglyphs, pictographs, any comments there as far as like places that you would recommend, for people who are maybe looking for some of that ancient history?
Oh, yeah, there's so much all throughout Arizona. Montezuma Castle National Monument is one of the biggest and most well-known. It was built by the Sinawa people, which Sinawa means without water. So, as you can imagine, it's a very dry environment, and they built this incredible 20-room, like, they call it a high-rise apartment into the cliff sides between 700 and 1,500 years ago. So they don't really know the exact date that this came to be. But they believe that families of this indigenous tribe lived there for over 300 years. And it's very well preserved. And it's just this incredible vision of how people were capable of building things back then. So that is a that's an unmissable one if you're really into, like you said, archaeological sites, if you're a history buff. The Casa Grande ruins are much more accessible. They're very close to Phoenix, just south of there in Casa Grande, which is like a little town there. And Casa Grande means big house in Spanish. And it's named after this great room that is preserved there, built by the Hohokam people. So the Hohokam tribe, that was the main indigenous group that people know about in the Phoenix area over 1,000 years ago. So this is one of the earliest preserved sites in the entire United States. And like I said, it's really easy to get there. You can drive, I think it might even be less than an hour south of Phoenix. So you should check that out. It's a very cool place. Then there's Canyon de Chelly, which is kind of similar to Montezuma Castle. It's this place where there are these incredible sandstone dwellings built by ancient Puebloan people who are also better known as the Anasazis between also like 700 to 1,000 years ago. So a lot of these things were built around the same time. And it's now within the Navajo Nation. It's still occupied by a lot of Navajo people on the reservation there. It's often mispronounced, by the way, because it's spelled Canyon de Shelly, but it's Canyon de Chelly, and which means inside the rock. So it's also another very, very cool cliff dwelling.
Awesome. Thanks for touching on that. Yeah, I love the archaeological sites. I have been to Montezuma Castle and can highly recommend. And like you said, it's pretty accessible. You can kind of add it into a day trip coming out of Phoenix. So yeah, thanks for touching on that. Again, right? Just going through hidden gems, places to visit, things to do. There's so much to see in Arizona. So where would you say someone should kind of post up for their trip?
So, if this is your first time visiting Arizona, I would probably recommend Phoenix. Even though I'm more in love with Tucson, I love pointing people in the direction of Tucson because I'm biased. I grew up there and I think it has like more personality and it's a prettier, like naturally prettier place. But Phoenix is a great place for entertainment. There's way more places to stay, like hotel wise and accommodations, way more events going on. It's also centrally located in the state. So many of these places we've already discussed are very accessible from Phoenix. So yeah, Phoenix I think is a really great starting point. It also is home to Sky Harbor International Airport where so many major airlines fly into. It's by far the biggest airport that we have in Arizona. If you want more of like a cultural, more of a like natural hiking destination, in the desert, that would be Tucson. Tucson also has tons of amazing day trips to offer too. Just quite not quite as many as Phoenix, so that's why I kind of say that. But do your research and like you can definitely figure out which one fits your vibe more. but Phoenix and Tucson are the biggest cities in the state, and you can't go wrong staying at either one. And then Flagstaff is a great home base if you're planning on going to, like, the Grand Canyon, Page, the Petrified Forest National Park. There's a lot in northern Arizona that's very famous landmark destinations, super close to Sedona too, so if you're an outdoorsy type and you wanna be up in the mountains where it's cooler, Flagstaff is the place to be.
Awesome. That's a great overview. I think that's really helpful. So, what about if you are on a budget? Would you say there's any particular places you especially recommend for budget travelers?
Yeah, I think Tucson's probably the cheapest of all of those places I just mentioned. You're always gonna find really good deals there. Hotels are rarely more than like, not super fancy hotels are rarely more than $100 a night, but you can find really good budget deals, especially if you book ahead. If you come during the summertime, I don't recommend it, which we'll talk more about, like, the best time to stay, but you're gonna get some killer deals in the summer, so if you want, like, a really cool resort getaway, maybe, like, in the Scottsdale area or northern Tucson, you can get some great deals in the summertime. So, that's kind of like a little budget tip, and then, you'll be poolside and you won't mind too much that it's so hot. Also, there's tons of camping options, like I mentioned before, so especially near Flagstaff, if you are a camper, you can stay all over Arizona. There's a lot of dispersed camping that's completely free, and I don't think I've ever seen a campsite cost more than $20, and even that's rare. So, yeah, if you're camping, you can see Arizona on a very tight budget.
Amazing. Thanks for that tip. I know we talked quite a bit about dispersed camping when we did our episode on Western road trips with Laura. So, yeah, I love you touching on that because I think that camping is such a great way to save a buck. And I agree. Like, in my experience, Arizona has really accessible campgrounds, more so than I think other states. So, great tip there. Yeah. Any other notable places you'd recommend people maybe checking out or kind of calling their home base when they visit Arizona?
Some other notable places to stay in Arizona, I'll just brush on these very quickly for the sake of time. Bisbee, one of my favorite places in the whole world. It's a mining town just like Jerome, and it is south of Tucson, takes probably like 2 hours to get there. You can stop in Tombstone on the way, like I mentioned before, and it's very close to Mexico. It's just got like the most personality of any small town I think I've ever been. I'm so fond of Bisbee, and if you have time to take a day trip from Tucson, highly recommend going there and maybe staying a couple nights. You can also do ghost tours there, big thing there, which I actually did back in December, and it was so much fun. It's a great place to bring the family, great place to go on a date, a day date, or, just to go with your partner and wander around the very steep streets of the small town. I love Bisbee to death, and I would recommend it to anyone. Pine Top and Greer are in the White Mountains, which is in, like, the northeastern part of Arizona, very close to the New Mexico border. I have a cabin in Greer, which is very small compared to Pine Top. The tiny little town, there's, like, 2 restaurants. Both of these towns, I kinda lump them together because usually you can, like, interchangeably stay in either one. Greer gets filled up pretty fast because there's only so many cabins, but Pine Top's a little bigger, and I feel like it has a little bit less personality, but if you're going skiing, both of these places are great home bases for Sunrise Ski Resort, which I told you about earlier, so, awesome summertime getaways too. It's, like, 20 degrees cooler up there in the summertime, so I have very fond memories of getting out of the heat in the desert and going up there with my family for long weeks in the summer. Page, talked about this for a little bit. Page is an awesome, awesome place to stay if you want to see Antelope Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, do that kayaking trip on the Colorado River, Lake Powell. You can then make your way to Monument Valley, which is one of the most incredible places in Arizona, too. It's a little bit further. It's probably like more than an hour away from Page, but just some of the craziest natural formations and desert scenery that you can see in the entire world if you have Page as your home base. And then Lake Havasu City, if you're a big lake person, you can even rent a lake house here and float around this humongous lake in like your little Airbnb or what have you. There's a lot going on there. There's a portion of the real original London Bridge here. I don't even really know the history of why we have that there at Lake Havasu City, but it's a huge tourist attraction to go see the London Bridge there and just an awesome beachy town in Arizona. If you're looking for like a beach getaway in Arizona, Lake Havasu City is an awesome spot too. So those are a couple other honorable mentions that I wanted to bring to the table today.
Thanks for touching on all of those hidden gems. I think those are all great suggestions. And I really appreciate you touching on a few that are great during, the really hot season, right? Because a lot of people, families, if the kids are out of school, they're going to come visit in the summertime. So recommendations like Greer, Pine Top, Lake Havasu City, Flagstaff, all places that people can go and visit when it's a little bit cooler. But kind of in that same vein, I'd love if you could kind of touch on, in your opinion, what you feel like is the best time to visit Arizona.
Absolutely. So, the best time to visit Arizona, at least in the desert regions, so Tucson and Phoenix, anytime outside of summer. So, realistically, that would be end of September through the beginning of May. Those are the best months to visit. It starts to get pretty dang hot at the end of May, but come June, that's when it's like really stifling. Then the monsoon season comes around end of June, beginning of July through the end of August, beginning of September. And that's when you've got those crazy summer storms that make it really humid along with the heat. And I mean, we're talking like real, real bad heat that gets up to like 115 degrees for days on end. So if you're not used to heat, it's brutal and it might really put a damper on your trip. And I always tell people, like Arizona is, like we said, there's a lot of stereotypes about the state that people think it's always so hot and so dry. And it does get very hot, but there are some incredible times of the year. So end of September into like early October, I'd say, is when it starts getting into the better like fall weather. And October through beginning of December is just gorgeous. The weather's perfect for hiking and outdoors. And then on the other end of that, during the springtime, which is probably like March into beginning of May, great, great hiking weather, great time for outdoors. We actually get really cold winter weather, especially like if you go up to the mountains. Like I said, in those skiing areas, we get tons of snow, several feet of snow, probably end of December and then mostly in January, February. So if you're coming in the winter time for that specifically, you should come January, February. My absolute favorite time to visit Arizona is the end of March because the weather's still like a little bit cold, but it's very refreshing and the spring flowers just start blooming. So you'll see these entire mountains covered in yellow and purple and it's just gorgeous. And yeah, like I said before, it's just the greatest time for doing things outdoors and doing some really awesome hikes.
That's awesome. Thanks for that recommendation. I have not visited Arizona in late March or March at all. So I haven't even considered wildflower season in Arizona. So that is definitely an extra reason to come and visit during that time of year.
Oh yeah, it's so stunning because like you'll go to these deserty areas, especially like the Superstition Mountains, which I mentioned earlier. It's just east of Phoenix, and the entire mountain will just turn yellow. Like these flowers will grow up the rocks, and it's just so so pretty. It's so special, and the weather's gorgeous too. So yeah, you can't go wrong with springtime in Arizona.
Awesome. I kind of want to get into safety. Do you feel like there's anything or anywhere you'd recommend avoiding when it comes to Arizona travel?
I feel like Arizona is quite safe. There are certain areas in the big cities that I wouldn't recommend maybe wandering around alone or at night, which is, pretty typical of any major city. But I've encountered very few safety issues during my entire life in Arizona. So I used to live in the sketchy area near the U of A, the University of Arizona, right on a very, very busy road with lots of car and foot traffic. The worst I ever had was someone trying to steal my roommate's bike, which, obviously isn't a good thing. I ran outside and I yelled at him and he dropped the bike and like I felt so powerful. That was like the one thing that's ever happened where it kind of like shook me up. Other than that, I've really never experienced any crazy safety issues. Violent crime statistics are trending down since 2023. So Arizona's doing well safety wise. It runs kind of in the middle of the pack compared to all the other US states. So it's not like the safest state by any means. But yeah, I think you definitely don't need to worry too much about crime during your visit. What you do need to worry about is wildlife. I think that honestly poses a much bigger danger. We have rattlesnakes, we have mountain lions, bobcats. They're prevalent in the mountain and desert areas. So wear the proper footwear, stay alert, bring a hiking buddy. Don't mess with the wild animals because you will be sorry if you end up running into a rattlesnake and it bites you. So yeah, don't mess with the wildlife. I've heard that the antivenom for a rattlesnake bite can cost up to $100,000. I have seen like multiple sources have such a wide range of like the hospital bills after that happens. So if you have really good insurance, it's like not the craziest thing, but you don't want to get bitten by a rattlesnake. And they're out. Like they have their season. It's always when it's really hot out, which is when you probably don't want to be hiking anyway. So just be aware of your surroundings, especially when you're hiking around in the mountain areas in the
Yeah.
desert.
You gotta watch for those javelinas too.
Yeah, definitely watch out for the aggressive javelinas. There was one time I had to pick up my dog and sprint with her away from a pack of javelinas because the one was like stamping its foot at me, and I was like, "Oh my god, this thing wants me dead." But yeah, there's the desert is their home, and we're just living in it. So be careful out there. Heat exhaustion is also a really big thing. So it's very risky in the summer. Drink a lot of water when you come to Arizona. I have an article about this on Travel Lemming about hiking in the heat and how it's just a very dangerous combination. So people die every year because they don't prepare for the heat. And typically the ones who get into deadly situations like that are visitors and not locals because they don't realize how dangerous it can be to be out in the elements when it's that hot outside. So, just have a good head on your shoulders and don't risk your safety by going on a hike when it's 110 degrees outside. Stay safe in the summertime for sure. Also, during the summertime, we have monsoon season, which I briefly mentioned earlier, which is when we have these crazy downpours of sane summer rains that can lead to flash floods. So before hiking or even driving in areas with washes, you'll get a notification on your phone about possible flood warnings. But don't risk your life to cross a stream that doesn't look that bad by driving across it. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen cars, even in my own neighborhood, just like swept, 20 or 30 feet into a wash. And in some of those bigger areas where the flow of the water is really strong, you can get into a very bad situation and it's just not worth it. So don't drive into a flooded wash after a monsoon. Don't hike during monsoon time. Don't if you know a storm's coming, stay in for the day. So those are kind of my main safety tips and they mostly revolve around the natural aspects of Arizona.
Those are really helpful tips, and I think, again, just kind of speaks to how a lot of people, the stereotype of Arizona, you're not thinking about monsoon type rain. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's something to definitely be aware of if you visit during that time of year. So,
For sure.
July to August, right?
Yeah, July to August. End of June is when the monsoons can start. I think they usually start beginning of July and go for a couple months there, yeah.
Okay. Things to know. So, yeah, Betty, I'd be curious too, just in your opinion, how much time should someone spend in Arizona?
I think you can definitely spend a long weekend in Arizona and get a lot done. I recommend at least a week though, especially if you want to see multiple sites in the state. I actually have a week-long road trip itinerary if you want to check that out. It's really jam-packed though, where like you're doing stuff every single day and you're driving pretty far, but you can do it. If you can space out more time, of course that's always preferable. I would say to have like 10 days to see some of the best things in the state. But yeah, there really isn't any right or wrong amount of time to visit Arizona. You're gonna see some awesome things no matter how long you spend here.
Awesome. And kind of you already sort of said, right, with your Arizona road trip that there's going to be quite a bit of driving, but what would you say are the best ways to get around Arizona?
Definitely rent a car. Unfortunately, Arizona does not have the best public transportation. We don't really have any trains you can take. Our bus systems are very slow and pretty limited. Cities are not very walkable. They're quite spread out. So, biking is huge though. So, if you're a cyclist, Tucson's actually it's named the third best cycling destination in the US. We have El Tour de Tucson, which is this incredible, massive bike race that we have in November where like the whole city shuts down. So if you're a cyclist, you can get around like that. But yeah, if you're trying to travel long distances in Arizona, just rent a car. They're usually quite affordable here and you can just see so much more. I would also recommend getting one that maybe has the ability to go off-roading so that you can go on some of like those dirt roads, off the beaten path areas for camping and hiking if you're into that sort of thing. Yeah, some like good four-wheel drive vehicle will take you a long way in Arizona. Also, motorcycles are pretty cool. They're not very safe, but tons of people will come to Arizona just to cycle on these long open roads through the desert. So if you're a motorcyclist, like that's a huge draw in the state. And then Uber and Lyft and even Waymo, which is the autonomous self-driving car, we have those in Phoenix, but Uber and Lyft are everywhere too. So you can definitely manage if you're coming for a short time, just taking those too.
Love that. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get around, but I agree. In my travels to Arizona, having a car made a big difference and just, allows you not only to access a lot, but kind of move at your own pace. So, yeah, great tips there. Kind of pivoting, you've already kind of talked quite a bit about how wonderful the food scene is in Arizona, but if you could kind of share a few like staple meals or drinks that you highly recommend people try when they come to visit.
Yes, of course. So, Mexican food. You gotta get Mexican food when you come to Arizona. If you get a Sonoran hot dog, I cannot recommend these more highly. I'm not a hot dog person, but Sonoran hot dogs are just so good, and they're so different. It's a hot dog that's wrapped in bacon, and then they top it with mayo, chopped tomatoes, onions, and sometimes they'll, like, throw on some chopped jalapenos, and, like, it's just so, so good. They have different variations, but the basic one is the best to me. You'll find those on food stands all over the streets of Tucson, Phoenix. You can find a Sonoran hot dog really anywhere in Arizona. Also, in that same vein of Mexican food, the chimichanga was apparently invented in Arizona. The famous El Charro Cafe in Tucson, there's several locations, but the original one is downtown. They claim that they dropped a burrito in the fryer and thus the chimichanga was born. So, if you don't know what a chimichanga is, it's a deep fried burrito. And they're so delicious. Also, tamales are one of my favorite foods in the whole world. They're huge during the holiday season. So many of my friends growing up are Hispanic, and it's such a big thing to make tamales like for Christmas and Thanksgiving. A tamale is basically just like a matzo dough, like usually made from corn, and then it has it like a meat filling. They also have vegetarian ones. It's so, so good. Don't eat the husk. Abigail told me that earlier. Don't eat the husk. A lot of people will try them on the first time. You don't want to eat the husk. And then tortillas in general are just like the greatest thing ever. And some of the best tortillas you could ever have will be in Arizona. So try tacos, try the food trucks, Sonoran dog little stands, taco trucks. You're gonna have great Mexican food in Arizona. Also, prickly pear is a really big, like, flavoring in Arizona where, like, you can get prickly pear margaritas, prickly pear candies, that kinda thing. You can try prickly pear just by itself, it's called nopales. I've only tried it in, like, a deep fried form, and it was delicious, so I recommend trying that out. If you wanna try something from, like, the indigenous people of Arizona, Navajo tacos or fry bread are delicious. Arizona is actually home to 22 federally recognized Native American tribes, and the Navajo Nation is in the northeastern quadrant of the state. So you can try this fry bread. It's like a denser, deep fried bread, and so when you get a taco, instead of it having that shell, it almost looks like it's a taco wrapped with like a pastry. But it's a savory bread. It's delicious. You should try it if you see any Navajo restaurants in the area. You'll definitely see it near Flagstaff if you go there. Beer is such a big deal in Arizona. We have over 150 craft breweries. I used to work at one, Moto Sonora, shout out to them in Tucson. So, tons of beer places. You can go on awesome beer crawls in Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, you name it. The beer industry brings in over $1.2 billion dollars to Arizona every year. So, big deal. I really want to touch on how Tucson is the first UNESCO city of gastronomy in the United States. So it was recognized 10 years ago in 2015. It basically means because of our diverse culinary community and tradition that's shared through food from indigenous and immigrant influences, and all the people have moved to Arizona long before it even became a state, UNESCO named it this city of gastronomy. And so UNESCO is about heritage and community and blending to create something worth protecting. So Tucson's recognized globally for that achievement, and we're very proud of that and work to uphold that standard with locally and responsibly sourced ingredients. Our food in Tucson is just so good. So, like I said before, so many awesome restaurants to try, not just Mexican food, but like every kind of culture from around the world you can try. Tucson Meet Yourself, by the way, is this huge food festival in October where all the local restaurants take over downtown Tucson to share all these cultural flavors. And there's all these different performances and different events you can attend. So the whole city shows up for Tucson Meet Yourself. It's a great time. So if you visit Tucson in October, check that out.
That food festival is just one more reason to plan a trip here soon. So sounds
Absolutely.
fantastic. Thanks for touching on all of that. I'm now very hungry. Mouth is watering. I
Of
love the food
course.
in Arizona. So yeah, all great recommendations there. Also, too, Betty, any recommendations as far as it relates to Arizona etiquette? Anything that, people should maybe plan for when they come to visit?
I would say one of the biggest things is hiking etiquette. like I said before, don't be dumb and endanger more people by going hiking during the summertime. A lot of different people are involved in these rescue teams that go out there searching for people who have gotten stuck on a hike or, have gotten dehydrated and gotten delusional and wandered off, and it's just a whole production. So if you are going to hike during the hotter seasons, make sure you hike super early in the morning and bring a ridiculous amount of water with you, more water than you've ever brought on a hike. Bring your camelback, bring a whole canteen, bring 3, just be safe, not just for your sake, but the sake of other people in the community. Also, protecting the environment. Don't mess with the cacti. I said I would talk about this a little bit before. So, you can be charged up to $2,500 and given a felony charge with up to 25 years in prison for damaging a saguaro cactus. That's what I mean when I say they're super protective. People don't mess with them, so don't mess with the ecosystem. Yeah, in our natural environment, saguaros take around 50 to 75 years to grow one arm, like I said. So if you see one with like 10 arms, it's very old. I think the oldest saguaro on record was 300 years old. So we really respect them, and you don't want to damage those. Make sure that you respect the saguaros. Another kind of etiquette thing in regards to weather is just it's not hot until it's in the hundreds and it's cold under 80 degrees. So people have a very skewed idea of the weather here, I think, because we're just so used to the heat. So, if you come here and it's 75 degrees and you're complaining about it being hot, people are going to be out like wearing sweaters because they're going to be freezing because it's just like, oh my God, like it's under 80. This is way too cold for us. So just know what you're getting into weather-wise before you visit. Also, the final thing, I mean, it's not really etiquette, but just knowing that Arizona's not just a desert, like you said before, it's not just a bunch of tumbleweeds rolling around in the dirt and the heat and a bunch of rocks, like it's Arizona's home to 6 major biomes, including tundra at the top of Mount Humphreys, which is our tallest peak in Flagstaff, which I always think is such an interesting fun fact. So yeah, it's over 12,500 feet and there's tundra up there that's like constantly icy and snowy and cold. So yeah, there's a lot that the state offers, and you're gonna get a bunch of different environments when you visit.
Absolutely. There's a lot to see and yeah, just so many different environments, but those are all great safety tips, especially the ones as it relates to the desert environment because yeah, I think that heat can be underestimated and it can be quite dangerous. So, again, to protect yourself, to protect the locals, be respectful and go out there prepared. So, another thing too, anybody who maybe wants to become a local themselves, do you have any tips for somebody wanting to move to Arizona?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the first thing we've talked about this multiple times is just, figure out do you like the heat? And if you know that you're getting into this like very hot environment during the summertime, I think you will absolutely love Arizona during the good months that I mentioned before. I mean, there's really no escaping the heat though. So just know what you're getting into. And outside of that, there's so much to do outdoors and you'll really never be bored. The cost of living is going up, but it's still very affordable, especially compared to like California. All the Californians are moving to Arizona. My mom is a realtor in Tucson, and she always tells me about how these Californians will come in and buy this like a huge mansion built into the cliffside. And they're like, oh my God, this would have gotten me like a 2-bedroom bungalow in Los Angeles. And it's like, oh my God, now you have a mansion here because it's just like your money goes a way longer way in Arizona. So it's not going to last long though, because everyone keeps moving there. So you should go now. You'll need a car. Arizona's very spread out and has poor public transportation systems, like I said before. So if you're moving to AZ, bring your car. And the job market's fairly stable. I know a lot of people moving to Arizona for a myriad of jobs from aviation to sales to education. So you really shouldn't have trouble finding a job there if you don't already have one lined up.
Thank you for touching on that. I've even considered like I love Arizona so much. Like if it wasn't so hot, it's that point number 1 where like if I really, really could get over the heat factor, I would move to Arizona in a heartbeat.
I
There's
know.
so much to do. It's so wonderful. I just think I would die in July, but
I know, it's hard. It's almost like that seasonal depression you hear about in the Pacific Northwest with it being rainy for months on end. It's like the same kind of thing where no one really goes outside in the summertime except to swim maybe because it's just so hot. It kind of feels like you're walking into an oven. But if you can get through those brutal months, there's so much to offer the rest of the year. So I'm always telling people like, there's always pros and cons.
for sure. There's pros and cons to anywhere, but at least in Arizona too, you can escape to the lakes, escape to the mountains. So you've got options even in the hot months. So yeah, I'm sure it was such a lovely place to grow up. But obviously, Betty, you're so passionate about Arizona. You know so much about it. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with all of our listeners and viewers today. Just to wrap things up, what would you say is the ultimate number one reason why you believe travelers should visit Arizona?
I think Arizona is one of the most beautiful states in the United States, and beyond that, one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The Sonoran Desert is home to so many unique species of plants and animals that you won't find anywhere else on the planet. So, the natural beauty of the state goes well beyond the Grand Canyon and the red rocks of Sedona. There are stunning landscapes in every single corner of the state. So, I just always sing the praises of Arizona's natural beauty. Also, the people are wonderful, they're friendly and accommodating. Prices are more affordable than many US states, especially on the West Coast, like we just recently talked about. So you'll get a big bang for your buck when you come here for vacation. And you'll also have the best food of your life. You go on the best hikes of your life, see an environment unlike anywhere else on earth when you visit Arizona. So I think everybody has to come here at least once in their life. So also appreciate the blend of culture. Arizona is a melting pot of indigenous and Hispanic culture that brings so much flavor and energy to the mix. So make sure you really immerse yourself in all of that and try some new things when you come to visit.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you again for sharing all of your knowledge. You can find out more on travellemming.com and read all of Betty's Arizona guide. She has so many. So it's your one stop resource for planning a trip to Arizona.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I have so much to say. Oh my God, I don't think I've ever talked this much on the show, but it was so wonderful getting to share my home state with you. Also, if you like the show, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We are posting on Thursdays, so follow along. We talk about new destinations all the time with the experts. Also, something that I've forgotten to mention in the past few episodes, we have meetups, travel lemming meetups. So if you check them out on our website, we have some of our experts in major cities around the US and Canada. We have Vancouver too, who are hosting these meetups at breweries. You can talk travel over a pint. See if any of those locations are near you. Abigail hosts the one in Denver, correct?
I do. Yep. And I always welcome anyone to come and join me. Yep. We will post
Yes.
probably every 4 to 6 weeks or so. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I used to host the one in Phoenix, but since I moved, my friend Michael's been hosting that. So if you're near Phoenix, go say hi to Michael. He's awesome. Yeah, we're so happy you came here to join us. Thank you guys so much for being here. Abigail, thank you for interviewing me. It was so much fun getting to talk about something that I'm so passionate about and be on this end of the interview for once.
Absolutely. It was so much fun to swap places. And Betty is your expert in all things Arizona. So I feel like you covered so much today. And again, there's so much more on Travel Lemming. So definitely check out that resource.
Perfect. We'll see you next time on the Travel Lemming podcast.